My parents immigrated from Latvia in 1951 after the Soviet Union took over Latvia, and they moved to the United States. And uh, one of the big Latvian games is volleyball. And my parents ended up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And there was probably 10,000 Latvians in Milwaukee. And I grew up in that whole cultural aspect of Latvians living in Milwaukee, speaking, reading, writing Latvian. And we played volleyball every Saturday. We had Latvian school in the morning. I had Latvian scouts, which were Boy Scouts, basically, just in a Latvian troop. And then afterwards, we had volleyball. And as a 10-year-old kid, I started playing in the gym with some great Latvian volleyball players that were in their 20s, playing for the Pan American team and playing for the U.S. military team or from down with the military team. But they were, super players, and they let me in the gym. And I still remember, I think I was like 12 years old, and the setter, Ivy, is still my mentor from way back then. And this was a turning point in my life from a volleyball standpoint, which a lot of kids, I think, can adapt to. That one person that kind of changed their life. He let me set. And the outside hitters, these big guys. I was 12 years old, probably 5'5", 5'4", just skinny little kid. And I was setting like crap, probably. It was inside, off the net, whatever. But he was giving me the opportunity to set, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And I still remember one of the guys, Gus, was telling Ivy, get this kid off the court. Get somebody else who can set the ball. And Ivy said, Gus, shut the F up. The kid's staying here and set. And Gus is still a good friend of mine. He's now 77 years old, and we laugh about it right now. So he doesn't remember saying that to me. But he said it to me, and Ivy was there and said, you're staying. Don't pay any attention to him. And I looked at him, I go, okay. I just kept setting. And from there on, it was like a validation for me to love the game and try to keep getting better at it instead of, he could have told me to go off and I would have gone tail between my legs, and I probably would never come back and play volleyball again. So from that point on forward, I was lucky enough to have a high school volleyball team in Wisconsin, one of 4 states in the United States that had volleyball. I played there. I made all state as a setter, and had some really good recognition. And from the Latvian team, we play all kinds of tournaments throughout the Midwest and East Coast. And being from a good, strong immigrant family, my parents would always let me go play and spend time on a weekend with these 20, 25-year-olds, but they've never let me go out and play with my American friends outside my yard, right? But anything I did with my Latvian friends, it was okay. So I'd be traveling with them, and I'd be exposed to volleyball all the time and got good at it. And Terry Luskevich recruited me at Ohio State. He came in, and I started playing volleyball at Ohio State as a freshman. I played there for 5 years. We had success playing in 4 Final Fours. I redshirted 1 year. Made it to the junior national level, got there, but I blew out my ankle. Again, a story for players. When I blew out my ankle, I felt sorry for myself, and I didn't come back as hard as I should have come back. I thought it sucks and blame the world and not myself and go after it. But then I always also realized that I probably was not at the level to make the national team level. And back then, there wasn't any international ball really going on from the United States in the late 70s. I was at Ohio State from 1976 to 81. And I also met my current wife when we were 19 years old. And I started actually studying in school instead of just playing volleyball. So I got a degree in labor relations, and then I got a master's in labor relations, and I decided to go to law school. And we got married in 83, and I jumped over to San Diego to go to law school. Since we were playing volleyball, we played in California twice a year. And I said, if I'm going to go to law school and live someplace, I'd like to live in Southern California. So I applied to 3 law schools. One accepted me in San Diego, and we got in our car in August of 83 and drove cross country. My wife had never been west of the Mississippi. I said, you'll like it. And she did, and she does. I graduated from law school in 86 and got my license, and I've been practicing law ever since then in my law firm. And then in 87, I started Sportsnet International because, again, Terry Luskevich came up to me. Both men and women were training in San Diego. 2 of my best friends were on the 84 national team. On the men's side, Terry was training the women's side. Doug Beal was the men's coach, again, an Ohio State connection. He was a good friend. And they said, nobody's representing these players. So I started representing the national team players because the national team was a year-round process then. It wasn't a half-year thing. They were getting paid to play all year round. So I was negotiating $50 a month more for some of these players with the U.S. national team because it was fun to do. And these kids needed some representation. And I wasn't much older than some of them at the time. I was 27, 28 years old. And then USA won 84 Olympics. The women started having some success in 84, 88. And then international games started growing. They started looking at the USA players as an option to support players. And one of my best friends, my best friend actually, Aldis Berzins, was on an 84 team, and he ended up playing Ravenna. My wife and I took a trip out to Ravenna in 1987 or so, and I met Paolo Bongiorno. Paolo is still an agent in Italy, and Paolo was so nice and introduced me to people, and he was my first contact in Italy. We placed a few players in Italy. Paolo became general manager for Milano at the time. Aldi became assistant coach to Doug Beal in Milano when they had Berlusconi as the owner, and all those days of things going on, and things just grew and got more opportunities and more clients. So that's how I initially started, just through contacts and having the national teams in San Diego, and nobody else was doing it at the time. So then it just blew up. Now we have, 150 FIVB agents. The FIVB starts asking for an agent fee and bonding, and everything's, a little different right now. The internet came around. Everybody can look on the internet to find out how teams are doing. We can watch matches on streaming. It's just evolved into a scenario where I continued representing players and been fortunate enough to represent Karch and John and some great players that have won just about every European championship, every league championship throughout the world, and just enjoyed the fact of representing the players. And it's not all about money. It's really, from my perspective, is enjoying the journey with the player. To see a young player come out of the university system and make it all the way, and finally the women get a gold medal after 30 years of trying with them to get that. That was really a cool feeling. The guys have done it before, so I've had that feeling with some of my clients before with that. But to make that journey up the road, I feel like I was part of that little piece of puzzle for them to get there as well. And it's just really something that I do out of more out of just loving what I do. Volleyball agency is never going to make you $1 million. It's not the NBA. It's not the soccer. It's not football. But it gives you a lot of gratitude. It gives you an opportunity to make a living, and it gives you an opportunity to see some young kids succeed and follow them through that process.
We have three bigger subjects. One is about transition from college environment to pro environment. I remember that you also told me that you did some, was it an AVCA webinar or Zoom call that you did with some coaches about about this?
Yeah, it was all assistant coaches. I think I had 130 assistant coaches from the USA, and I did a 1-hour webinar for them. On two things. Number one was the transition, or how the coaches can help players. Yeah. And then more of the stuff, just what they should think about. What do players have to think about? Like your first set of questions here, as far as the transition of volleyball players from college environment to the professional environment is what I focused on the most. And it was amazing. Most assistant coaches had no clue. And then I started speaking a little bit about the college coaching contracts, and they were interested in that as well.
For sure. Yeah. No, so my immediate first question is then, why were it only the assistant coaches? Because this is also like let me reframe. For sure, it is not a college head or a university college, however we call it, head coach's job to prepare professional athletes. Like, this is not the objective. Like, they're not incentivized to do that. This is completely out of their world also. But is this, for some athletes, it's their next step. So in the end, we're all educators, or we want to be educator. If you're an agent, if you're a volleyball platform, if you're a coach, you're educating people, so you need to prepare them for the next step. So that's my general concept about everything that we do every day.
Right.
So then it's weird to me that it was only 2 assistant coaches. Maybe it was set up that way. So
yeah, two things there. The AVCA has a head coaching I don't know how you call it, department or group, an assistant coaching group in the AVCA. And this was set up for the assistant coaches. But I think the second part of the answer to that question is that the assistant coaches, many of them do most of the recruiting for the players. And I argue to the head coaches that they have now accepted in the higher level schools that if they can show recruits that they have players going to the USA national team and have players going to play professionally, this helps in their recruitment of young players to the university. So it is important for the university to say, hey, yeah, we've had 4 players at the USA national team. We've had 4 Olympians. I've had 10 players play overseas. I've had several players play in Turkey in the highest level. We're winning European championships. We're winning Italian championships. And that just inspires the younger players that are motivated to reach the highest levels to see that this program allows them to potentially reach that level of play. Whereas, some programs, there's no way. And it goes back to your first question that we were talking about, understanding the transition from university to professional. It really depends also on the level of the player, on where they're going to play, which country they're going to play. If you can go straight to Vakifbank or Conigliano, hey, that's a straight transition. But very few university players can make that transition, at least to the starting lineup. There have been a few start in the third position of the outside or middle or second opposite. But to make that transition is very difficult. So there's always, from the top level university programs, top 25 or so teams, to go into France or Germany, mid-level, Turkey, Italy. It's going to be a downgrade from what they're used to getting in the university system as an athlete, but it's an upgrade as to quality of play. All of a sudden, you're going into a higher quality of play with the world-class players, but you're not getting the same support that you're used to getting in the university system.
Yeah, it's on yourself. I think an important piece of context that we have to give the people watching is when we talk about, and you just already mentioned a couple of leagues and a couple of, let's call it levels where we're talking about, that the both of us, when we talk about professional athletes, professional players, a lot of, I don't have a clue last year, but it's a few hundred players, 300 or 400, maybe it were 500 at the peak, that have an international transfer coming out of the States on a yearly basis. Right now, when we talk about professional athletes, we are talking, and I'm just shooting a number here, about the top 20% of the players that actually have the possibility to make this a sustainable career, sustainable job. Not people that have the opportunity maybe to go and play in a really small European league, be there, survive, have a nice extra senior year, let's call it like that, have a European experience. When we talk about professional athletes, we're talking about people that make money with volleyball. Is this the right context that I'm shaping now, or?
Absolutely. We have between 400 and 500 transfers last season, and that's about been the average over the years. And people think, oh, look at all these people being transferred to professional leagues. And I think 20% is probably high. I'd say maybe 10% of those people and are looking to make a living off it, maybe 10 to 20%, depending on what you consider a living. Mm-hmm. But to answer that question too, you're right on point. I break down the leagues into basically 4 categories. The A categories are the Turkish leagues, the Italian league, the Polish league, the Brazilian league, the Japanese league. Russian league's probably in there right now as well, but I don't deal with them at all, and not too many people are going over there from at least the United States to play in Russia. And then there's the next level leagues like France, the Germanys, I think are in that category. China as well, although China has some A-level teams as well. And then you got the lower level teams in the C and D level, but there's also a mesh. So there's, even in Italy or in Turkey, there are 4 or 5 top level teams, but there are 5 or 6 B level teams also. So there's a differentiation between the different leagues. There might be 2 or 3 in Germany or in France that can be considered A level teams as well. You got your Malous and your Turin, your Potsdam, your Dresden, they're all not competing in the European championships. They're not getting killed. They're there. They just don't quite have the guns that the top level teams in Turkey and Italy have, but they can compete. They're good athletes that are making that transition to the next level.
And then maybe an extra caveat is that's something that the both of us know, but other people know less for sure. You just mentioned the top teams in the top leagues, and then some other stronghold teams, decent teams, developmental teams in the same league, like in the Italian league. But the tricky thing is that those teams also change. It's not like you have a top ranked college, you know where Stanford is, you know where Kentucky is. Like these programs and these cultures, they stay the same for a decade, whatever, if nothing substantially changes. But these the mid-level Italian teams, 1 year there's a financial issue, then they lose their gym, So it's also tricky to know which team is that developmental team the next season, And that's always funny too.
That's a trick of the trade. I mean, that is what we are looking for every day to give the advice to our clients. And the way I've set it up, and I don't know how other people have set it up, but I think it's really important that there's no one agent in Italy or France or Netherlands or Poland or whatever that can control the whole world market. You need to have a group of individuals that are working together. I can call my partner Massimo or Tunç or Alessandro or Chris Chen in China, and I can call them on that same day and find out what's going on in their leagues. I can't do that and other agents have used that against me, saying, hey, you're from the United States, you don't know what's going on in Italy. Well, I do know, because my partner is exclusive partner to me and I can find out from him. But same thing for the Italian agent. He can't find out what's going on in China or in France or Germany, just like me. He knows Italy well because he's in Italy, but the other markets, you have to serve your client the best way. You have to know what's going on. And like you said, in the mid-level teams, the coaches can change, the general manager can change, the financial situation dries up, the sponsor all of a sudden, the company that says they're going to donate all this money to the team says, oh, the team's not winning, I'm not going to pay anymore. You look at the historical situation, has that happened before? Every year, players change, players go from one place to another. Coaches' philosophies might change, the budgets change. And that is the most important thing in the mid-level teams, especially in the Italys and the Turkeys. France and Germany's are pretty consistent. They tell you the way it is. They say, we just don't have the money. Whereas I find in Turkey and in Italy, a lot of times they'll say, we have the money, but they have the money verbally, but it's not in the bank account. So if something happens halfway through the season, it just never, it doesn't get paid. And that's the important thing to know. The reliability of the team. And those are the biggest headaches for agents. If all of a sudden in the middle of the season, the money dries up and there's no money and the payment slows down, team's not doing very well. Those are scenarios where it's a nightmare.
No, the funny thing is, and there's probably not for the article, for the recording. So we are small, and for us, it's really important to have that one-on-one contact with the coaches. These are players that are younger and that we know, because we have the international experience, playing experience, that they can reach that sustainable career trajectory or that path. For us, it's really important, and it's still possible, but that's also due to volley brains, also due to playing in all those leagues and knowing a lot of people, speaking the languages, and to have the one-on-one contact. But the exception is then, yes, we talk about China and Japan. Okay, you need to have somebody on the ground there. But the difference is, of course, you live in the States, we live in Europe. So that's the big difference right there already. There's positives and negatives to every kind of story. For us being smaller, it's still possible to have this one-on-one contact. But if somebody uses the type or how you work, like having people in different countries against you, it's mostly just like to try to convince somebody. And these people are unfortunately, most players are easily convinced, because you're talking to somebody who has a huge dream. Their only dream is to play. It's always a very thin line where you're walking on, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I have so many agents promising players opportunities that are, I always say, I can promise you a possibility, but I want to see something in writing. And I tell young players that too. I go, if somebody's promising you something, get something in writing from the team. You can get an offer, say, hey, I'm interested. At least something from the team saying that they are interested in you and they are actually contemplating this is what they can pay. And we need another week or two to figure out what we need and what we're going to do, or this is a definite offer for you from the team. Because an agent can say anything. The possibilities, of course, I have a possibility for every one of my potential clients coming out of university here in December. I have 6 possibilities in Italy and I have 5 possibilities in Turkey, but nobody has come to me and said that they have made an offer to these players. And that's what I represent to the players. I go, there's people that are interested, but these don't mean that you're going to get the contract. And well, you said, I think it's really important to know the coaches. The coaching is one thing, and I think the coaches really, if they care about their players, which they do, and they also care about their careers, so they know what's going on in the inner workings of the club. They can feel if the club has the money to pay the players, what kind of support they're going to give, what kind of physio they have, what kind of strength training they have, where their expectations are. So if a GM or an owner has an expectation of being a top 4 team in a certain league, the coach can say, there's no way we can get there with what we have. We are more of a realistically a 5 to 8 team, or we're going to try to stay up from being relegated down to the 2nd division. And if we have those expectations, those are really good for the players to have too, because if the expectations are unreal, you go into the season and you're losing to teams you probably should lose to, but the club thinks you should win. That brings out an automatic conflict between what is reality and what's not reality.
Exactly. Yeah. Understanding transition from college to pro volleyball, both as an agent, as a lawyer, what are to you the most significant differences between expectations that a college player needs to have and an international pro league player?
And that goes back to what we discussed a little earlier too, as far as it depends on the club and the country. But in general, the differences, the cultural differences are huge. The language, understanding a player is going from the United States to another country, the size of the city, where did they grow up in the United States? Are they from a small town, big town? Are they going to a small town or a big town in Europe someplace? Or and what I said, back up a little bit, depending on the club and country, big difference if you're going to Asia, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, South America. Americans are more attuned to Western Europe. That's why there's a lot of players in Western Europe to play, because it's easier for them to adapt to those changes, and many people there speak English. If we go to China or Japan, there's always a translator. It's a totally different culture. Food's different. People think different. Very important to have somebody that understands the cultural differences, because what they say might mean a completely different thing than how we interpret what they say. In Western Europe, what they say and we say in the United States is pretty much the same thing. In Asia, can be completely different. Training can be different. What the top players, and I'm talking about the top players. So like that top 10 to 20% that we were talking about that goes in there and tries to make a professional career out of their volleyball performance playing overseas someplace, rather than having the European experience and probably not having a great chance of moving up the level and making it to the USA national team or a higher level. But the training coming from a Nebraska or a Texas or a Kentucky or Stanford or Minnesota in the United States is going to be a different situation regarding facilities, the support they have. The players basically don't have to do anything other than show up for training. They are told what to do every day and how to do it, and they come in and perform. They're taken care of at a very high level, whereas you go overseas, again, there's only a few teams like that. My clients that have made it from the middle level teams up to the top 5, 10 teams in the world, huge difference. You get to those top 5, 10 teams, they are taken care of. They're told where to go, what to do. Everything's first class. But that does not exist in most of the clubs. The fan base, sometimes there's 100 people in the gym, and sometimes there's a couple thousand, but generally the gyms and the places where the players play are much smaller arenas in every place in the world than they are in the United States. Nebraska fills up 9,000 people every match. That's crazy. Even in the United States, that's a lot. Many colleges have 4,000 to 5,000 people every match. But then you go overseas and maybe you have 100 people, 200 people show up for a match, small town. And that's normal. Other players on the team, sometimes the players get along, sometimes they don't, depending on the situation. Do the other players speak English? Are there other Americans or Canadians on the team that make the Americans feel a little more comfortable in adapting a little quicker? Is there somebody there that has been there before that can show them the ropes of how to go buy food, how to take transportation if they have to go someplace? And the other biggest thing for these players is, in my opinion, besides the cultural differences, is the winning, losing. All the players that go play professionally are the top players in the United States. They almost all come from a winning program. So they are used to winning all the time. They've never lost. High school, USA club volleyball, university volleyball, always a winning percentage and always trying to make it and win the championship wherever they play. And then all of a sudden they're in a middle level team in a league in Italy or Turkey or France or Germany. Doesn't take your pick. They're not going to start out at the top team. And all of a sudden they're in a 50-50 season, or they're in a losing season. And that is mentally, many of them cannot just adapt to that, saying, how can I lose? I've never lost in my life. So that, to get over that hump is a big thing to discuss. And those are things we talk about ahead of time in preparing the athletes. Instead of painting a picture of, hey, everything's going to be great, go overseas, you're going to get your money, this team is great, the coaching is great, the general manager is good, the city's beautiful, it's going to be a wonderful experience. You're going to be away from home for 8 months. You'll love it. My philosophy is to paint a bad picture. I mean, you can have a great opportunity, but give them all the negatives as well as the positives, so that what their expectations aren't so high when they go there and they want to fall off a cliff. So just be very transparent with what the real scenario is.
No, I really liked what you said about winning and losing, and then it's of course very logical that you talk about somebody going to play overseas in America, going to Western Europe, etc. But as you know, any foreigner going to play in a league, even if you're from France and you go play in Italy, you're going to be treated very differently. There's not a lot of difference between how people in Italy, and we're just making the example of the league, we're not stigmatizing anybody or anything, but okay, you go and play in one of the best leagues in the world, Italian league. If you enter there as a French outside hitter or an American outside hitter, you're going to be treated as a stranger. You or somebody that took a spot of an Italian player. So you better be one of the best outside hitters in that team straight away. This goes under the umbrella of, am I prepared to be a professional player? Because those things are asked from you, even if people paint the picture that way, and even if it's an easy thing to say for teams with less financials, with less possibilities to pay. It's easy to say, look, we're a developmental team, and we had players that went on from us to bigger teams. Every team has that. So it's an easy excuse to say, look, we have our financial means are nothing, but we're developmental. Very few teams, or even no teams, are truly developmental teams in the pro leagues. So any foreigner is a stranger, and any stranger needs to perform, and you need to be ready for that. And we can hold people's hands, we can make stories, but in the end, it's not more complex than that, And that's a
really good point, because even if the expectation, that goes back to what we were talking about, the expectations to the players sometimes are too high for the club. So they think they're going to have one great outside hitter come in and change their from losing to winning. But in volleyball, you need it's a team sport, and that one player, even though she or he has a great match and the team loses, many times it's still like that player did not do enough. Or even worse, every player isn't Michael Jordan. They will have some bad matches. And I always say, even Michael Jordan had some bad games every once in a while. He had some bad games. And there are very few Michael Jordans in the world. So there are players that are going to have some bad matches. It's just the way it is. And when you have that bad match, they go, why are we paying all this money for you when you can't play at a high level? So the players have to have a thick skin when they go in there saying, you're going to be criticized as a foreigner. You have a lot on your back, a lot of expectations. And it goes back again to the coaching aspect of it. Who is your coach, and what is the coach really at a high level or a middle level, and what kind of pressure is the coach under, and how they react to the player? Because that, again, we're going off a little bit on a tangent, but
No, that's fine.
coach can have a huge effect, especially on a young player's ability to rise to the next level. They can destroy a young kid going overseas and has a few bad matches. They lose their confidence, their mentality goes down, and the coach puts them on a bench or doesn't talk to them anymore. And then even worse, if there's a communication issue between the coach and the player, where the coach doesn't speak very good English, and there's loose translation there. Players can, that could be the end of their career. They begin to hate volleyball, and they think, oh, I can't play at this level. Whereas a coach can take a player slowly and develop them and make them into that good player. It's just the expectations, again, are sometimes way too high for a young kid coming out of the university system to play at the next level. And that's part of my dilemma a lot of times too, because what some agents do is try to place a young player into a team that's over their head. And yeah, they get paid a little bit more money, and but again, the expectations are high. And what I tell the players, if they have these opportunities, would you rather play for example, for Malouz, top team in France? You'll win a championship, keep winning. Oh, you'll not win a championship. You have a chance of winning a championship. You'll be in the upper tier of the French league, or you go into a team in Italy where you're getting paid more money. You're going in there and you can't produce. And all of a sudden you're not doing what you're doing, and your mental aspect of the game goes down. From Malouz, you have a great season, you're in the finals or in a championship, and then you can jump to the next league because you got your feet wet. You had an opportunity to play at a good level, and you were successful, rather than going into a situation where you're going to fail and then trying to work your way back up again.
And the biggest thing, and that's something that I'm thinking about right now, and that's why it's fun to talk about this, because I live the world. I'm still living the
Right.
world. We do volley brains, we know coaches, and that's the reason also why we started volley brains, to raise the level of the coaches, for sure, in Europe. And it's difficult, and it's logical also, because we have all those bad experience in our head, but also great ones. So there is so much gray, because we're talking black and white a bit, but there's so much gray that, it's years that are, in general, on average, they're positive, but you maybe didn't win. You didn't maybe increase your contract. You had a good time. You made friends. There's also that part. So there's a lot of gray also there, like you just said, like a more mediocre team. You go there to show yourself. And then going back to what we just said 5 minutes ago with the winning and losing, that mostly you're not attuned to losing. If you are in a team that loses 3-4 games, it's going to be really awkward, because the president and the sponsors, they want to do team meetings, and people are going to get upset. Players are going to players want to show themselves that they're also important, and people are going to start to yell, and you're not used to be in that situation as a foreign player, as a US player, but also as a foreign player. So all that stuff makes it actually super interesting. Also, just from a developmental point of view, you're going to experience so much in such a small time. And all that goes under the umbrella of, are you ready to be in that world? Without, if people don't pay you, if people are abusive, verbally, whatever, okay, all those things don't go, obviously. But in the end, it's still a strange, small world. And that's the most peculiar thing for me still, after all those years.
Yeah, but you understand the game. You play it at a high level. Your high Q is high, and for me, the first question I always ask my partners is if there's an opportunity someplace, who is the coach and what is the quality of the coach? What is his IQ of the game? Because there are great coaches and there are mediocre coaches, and I'm a true believer that the great coaches adapt to whatever players they are given. So they won't just go to the conference, listen to coach say, "Hey, this is the offense I play," or "This is the defense I play." They learn that offense and defense. They go back to their team and they try to implement whatever offense and defense they have been taught. Instead of the great coaches know all the offenses, defenses. There's no right or wrong answer. They're willing to take a gamble. They'll put a outside hitter that might be better at the opposite, or a middle blocker, change them to the opposite. Whatever they have, they have their 8, 9 players, mold them into the best team, set whatever the best sets are for their situation. What hitters like to hit what. Those are the coaches that adapt to the situation rather than going into a season going, I'm going to play this way, and win or lose, we're going to keep playing this way through the whole season, and they keep losing. They don't change anything. They don't change the players. They don't change their techniques or their philosophies on the court, off the court. And the other thing too is the coaches sometimes don't understand the training regimen of the players. If a player is hurt or needs additional rehabilitation or physio, they need to adapt and let the player get healthy instead of putting them in practice every day and continuing to make them jump every day. Listen to the physio, listen to the strength training coach instead of saying, no, that player's got to be on the court. They can't miss any training. Well, again, the team invests an X amount of money in a player, and I don't understand why then they don't try to have that player continue to perform at the highest level by taking care of their bodies, by supporting their bodies. And if a player says they're hurt or the physio says they're hurt, they are hurt. There's always the exceptions when players are faking their injuries or there's something else going on in the background. But most of the time, players want to be on the court. They want to perform at the highest level. But playing all year round like they are now at the highest level with the national team players and then playing professionally, when you're playing 10, 11 months out of the year, you know this very well. It's grueling on your body. And you are going to eventually break down at some point in time. So it's very important for the coaches to understand that maybe you shouldn't train every day the same way repetitively over and over again. It doesn't do any good.
We are still in that era, even though so much has been said and so many people are busy, and also physical coaches, performance coaches, etc., about recuperation, being ready for the next game. But we're still in that early 2000 mindset of incentive also of a player is to be healthy and to play as long as they can. Incentive of a pro coach is that they win the next game. It's still like that. And then if we talk about players, and I'm going to tell 2 funny stories. I'm going so off track here. So to me, the 0.1% world top players are the players that can still say today, look, coach, I'm not going to play. I'm not healthy. I'm not 100%. If I'm not 100%. But this is really the top 0.1%. All the other players are scared of contracts or scared of being seen in a different way, that coaches are going to talk with each other, agents, they're going to phone their agent, whatever, I can name, I don't want to, it's not even throwing players under the bus if I would name them, but there are some players that really stepped up for themselves in the last 2 decades, and they really say to God, look, I'm not going to train, I'm going to play, I'm not ready, I don't feel ready, I need 4 days, I need this treatment. But there's so few players that do that. So people should step up more. And then this goes also into the deeper sidetrack of the international calendar, volleyball world, HVB stuff, having 2 world championships now every 4 years, every 2 years, every month. The calendar is gruesome. It's just too much. And yeah, players try, but nothing happens, and that's a pity. My story, first year in Russia, Novosibirsk. This coach is not following Volleyball, so I don't have an issue with saying this, and this probably won't be online. a week before we played the finals of the cup. To name some American players. Volleyball was at Kazan. Really pretty was it also at Kazan. I bumped my head on practice against my opposite player. So I'm a middle blocker. The set on the opposite side goes to position 4. And the guy on the right of me, he got faked by something. And he's moving to the other side. So we bump heads. So I get hit there. I black out. 30 seconds, I'm back. And I stopped practicing. Already stopping practice in that team was not done. You don't stop practice. You continue practicing. We did 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the afternoon. Afterwards, my assistant coach is Italian. This is the only foreigner in that team. And I tell him, look, there's something wrong. I was running contact, so it could be that, but there was like something, if you have a bad contact, you have this feeling like it's a bit off, So I told him, look, we need to get this checked because this is not okay. We're in the middle of Siberia. This is our hometown. So the next day, he calls me in the morning. He tells me, look, Matthias, the head coach doesn't want that we check this because he needs you to play, But he told me, look, we're going to go to a private hospital to get this checked out. So we got this checked out. There was nothing wrong. But the eye doctor told him, like, look, okay, there was a serious chance that his retina would become a bit more loose. And if you then continue to play, of course, it's not smart to do. It's a really bad thing to do. So the head coach told him, don't go and check this. So we did this like on the side. Nobody knew this, but it was okay. I could play, I could train. So these are the crazy expectations that people have. Okay, this was the edge case, but this is the expectation they had. Second story, second year in Russia at Belgorod. This is more or less with the half Russian national team, the pre-Olympic year. The year goes really bad. We're playing really poorly. And there's some team conversations with the presidents, and they're just like, yeah, Matthias, you're the foreigner. You don't need to be there. You're not part of the conversation. It's okay. You're just somebody that's here to help us, And this is like the opposite thing. Like, you don't get judged because you're a foreigner. It's just like, yeah, whatever. This guy, That's why I talk about the gray area. There is so much gray, and you will experience all these things when you're a professional. That's it's very weird. It molds you for sure. I can say that. Yeah.
But I think from a player's experience too, and what your wife's doing right now, it's such a huge benefit to give this kind of advice to your clients, to let them know if this happens, you have to say and be strong and say, I'm not going to practice. But it goes to your point that players, especially when they're starting to go up the ladder, and it's very true. If somebody has a knee problem, the next year, everybody that is looking at one of my players that had a knee problem is going, how's the knee? Can they make it through the season? Very few teams, even in USA sports and NBA or NFL, Major League Baseball, very few teams really, in my opinion, care about the player. And I say a player is a piece of meat. And once your productivity is done, if it's a year, 10 years, great. Yeah, everybody loves the 10-year superstar. Those are the ones we all remember and hear their names, but nobody really remembers the 1, 2, 3, 4-year players that had great years that contributed to the team, but they had a career-ending injury where they can't play anymore. But they sacrificed their body, and then they're done. At least in the pro sports, top pro sports in the USA, I think if you play in the leagues for a certain amount of years, you get a pension, so you get money for the rest of your life. But even if you don't play those certain amount of years and you get hurt before that, you're done. You get whatever you've been paid, and half the time the money is not even guaranteed. So the players should be responsible, but as they should be caring about their own bodies. But there is that aspect that if you complain too much or you're a problem, the next team's not going to take you. They'd rather take somebody else. And there are a lot of options out there, especially in that mid-level. Mm-hmm. If you get to the superstar level where you played at the highest level and you got those people that are at that level, as an agent, I love that because I can do the same thing. I say, she's not playing. She's going to sit out. That's it. Because I know they have a potential to play somewhere else next season, no matter what. It's just, hey, they're hurt. They know what their body's telling them. But usually, too, when you get to that level, most of those coaches and teams take care of those players. So that problem has gone away, at least in the top teams mostly. And if you are at that level, usually you don't have to put your foot down anymore where I'm not playing anymore. At least I haven't seen it with American players. And with US too, we have a very strong way. I'll jump a little bit about maintaining our legal protections in our transfer certificates to the FIVB. The USA has all kinds of protections written in there. So I have the backing of the US Federation for the national team players. If they're hurt and they can't play for more than a week, their staff can come in and they can take a look at the x-rays. They can make an evaluation. They can demand a player comes back to the USA. Now, that presents a different contractual issue. Now, the team might say, yeah, go back to USA, but we're not going to pay you. But what is more important at that point in time in a player's career? Is it better to take care of your body so that you're healthy to keep playing in the future? Or do you keep playing through that rest of the season? And after the season, your knee or shoulder is shot for 6 months or a year or never gets better. I mean, and that's the scenario. The team wants immediate results. The player wants longevity of a career. And those are always conflicts that take place. But that is a very important aspect of trying to convince players to stay off the court and get the right rehab if they have some problems, and be attuned to what your body is telling you.
Which is something that is ingrained now in the international transfer. Like you just said, the USA has these rules, these guidelines in the international transfer. So when foreign clubs contract a player, when they click the button on the international transfer platform, then they agree to these rules. A lot of federations don't even know that they can do that. Can you believe that? They don't even know that there is a possibility to put stuff in there. Okay, no more side tracks from my side. What we have to do.
I think it goes along with the stuff, and physicality of it also goes. One of your questions is maintaining performance, and I think that part of it also goes on the player's side too when they are off from their international season, to make sure that they maintain. Everybody wants to take a couple weeks off. You need to, but you don't necessarily need to play volleyball when you're off during off your professional season, unless you're on the national team. Then you're still playing volleyball. But if you're just playing the European circuit and you have 3 or 4 months off, do training, but you don't have to play with the ball. You don't have to keep working the same body parts that you've been using for 8 months. But stay in physical shape. Do all your isometrics, Pilates, everything to keep your body in the highest physical condition, so that when you don't show up 4 months later, you're not completely out of shape, and all of a sudden you get hurt again from the beginning. I mean, that I stress to my clients, this is your profession. You should not be afraid of saying, I am a professional volleyball player. That is what you are. And to be a professional volleyball player, you have to maintain your body. Your body is your temple. That's all you have right now, your body and your mental ability to continue playing at the highest level. And that's what you've got to maintain. If you don't want to be a professional athlete and sit behind a desk, then you can get fat and out of shape, and it doesn't matter. But if you're a professional athlete, you show up out of shape in September or August, it's just not a good show. And for me, it also shows that you're not really motivated to be that in that profession. And in a national team too, and maybe that's something that other national teams, I don't know how they act, but in the USA, Jim, why so many of the USA top players want to return to the USA gym every summer is because it is basically a rehabilitation situation for them. Karch and John both understand that it's an 8-month rigorous time period for the players, even though they're playing at the best teams in the world in the different countries. Their bodies have been just beat up. So when they come into the USA gym back in the early May, they are completely rehabbed. The physio takes care of them. If they can't play on the court, they're not forced to go on the court. What they want to do is get their bodies ready for VNL or the World Championships, and to make sure they're ready for the Olympics every 4 years. not to push them into training and jumping and playing every day. That's not the most important thing. And that's why you see a lot of USA players come back and want to be back in that USA gym during the summertime versus I think what I've heard from certain countries' national team programs, the motivation is not that high to go back into the gym for various reasons. And the USA players don't get paid a lot of money to play on a national team. Money is not, they're getting paid a lot more to play internationally. So money is not driving them to come into the gym for those 3 or 4 months.
This really is the thing that I want to talk about way more on volley brains, because I'm like biting my tongue all the time not to interrupt you. John Dunning told me that listening is the biggest virtue, so I'm really trying not to interrupt you. To me, and it's funny because it's something that we, I think the first time that I talked with Terry, we talked about this like dichotomy between professional player and coach, professional coach, and then we can talk about college player and college coach. That the coach is mostly more wants to become something faster, has more like it's hurrying up more or putting more pressure on themselves, even though their timeline can be 40 years. If we're talking about like Russ Rose, you can be a head coach for 40 years. Your peak as a pro player when you start at 21, in 7 years, you can arrive at your peak. Understanding the possibility that you have and that has been given to you by yourself, by your talent, by the people that have been guiding you. I think that's a really big one. And that also ties into people having more possibilities than maybe 20 years ago. Like 20 years ago, if you could be a professional volleyball player and you had that talent, that was the best thing you could do. Right now, maybe you can be a social media something. You have some other interests. Like right now, you can develop anything into something. Like I'm doing a website, I'm talking to people, having that clarity of, okay, now this is the only thing I focus on right now for the next 5, 6, 7, 10 years. This is the thing I'm doing. And every year I have a week, I can talk with my agent. I can talk with people that I trust that know international volleyball and then evaluate what I'm doing. But don't overthink. This was my biggest mistake. That's probably why I'm talking about it. Don't overthink why you're doing it. Just do it, because this possibility will fade away. This will go away. To me, that is one of the biggest things. And also like talking to players, to coaches, I like to repeat that because it's something, I know it's very obvious. I know it's so obvious, but I think it's one of the biggest, one of the biggest frameworks that people forget about.
Yeah, I think exactly. You got the coaching, the coaching mentality. I mean, everybody's judged by winning and losing, right? In sports. One of the questions we're going to discuss is what's important. What performance factors should a coach or a player consider? Well, winning and losing is how we judge how somebody does. How many medals have you won? How many championships have you won? So the enormous pressure on the coach to win every season. And that's where it goes back to the college situation in the United States. Again, performance-wise, in the transition and developing younger players. The university coaches, if they get their 3 to 5 year contract, if they don't perform in 3 to 5 years, they don't have a winning program, they're done. And then what are their opportunities for another job? Well, it's not going to be at the same level. They might be able to go down into a lower school someplace and then have to start and win again and move up the ladder or go to assistant coaching job someplace for a top school for a head coach. But if you don't win, you don't succeed. And that's the most important guidance for measurement of how somebody does. I think there's more to it than just winning and losing. I think a coach has a lot of other things to do. And, in our society, if you don't win a championship, you lose. People, I always laugh. In the United States, the Super Bowl, only 2 teams get to the Super Bowl, or in Europe, the European Championship in soccer, only 2 teams. But if you lose, you're a loser. But you've made it into the finals of the highest game that happens every year, and you don't win, you lose. And if you do that 2 or 3 times, the coach is labeled as somebody who can't just win the big game, although they've been at the highest level for so many times. And and it goes back to what you're talking about too. The coaches understand the game. Most coaches understand the game at the level, just whether, again, I call it their IQ or their ability to really read players and understand what they need and how to put the puzzle together. I think that's what differentiates the great coaches between the medium coaches. Uh, but they all come down to the same thing. They have to win in order to succeed. And if they don't, they look at it as a failure, and it puts a lot of stress on them because that is their occupation.
Financial pitfalls, caveats that are things to look out for, mm, things that are done regularly, signing money, insurance. Can you like paint a bit of a picture about that? Because obviously people that are gonna watch this will have no idea.
Yeah, I think that the most important aspect for players contracts, first of all, is there's 5 or 6 different aspects that I focus on, and one of the biggest ones always is the arrival date. When our player is going to arrive? Coaches want them 3 years before the season starts. Player wants to get there 5 days before the season starts. So, and there's always some things make sense. If the player in the USA is not on the national team and they're not playing anywhere, I have no problems having a player get there a month to 6 weeks before the season starts. I think that makes sense, especially if they're the setter. If they're the setter, they're the quarterback, they're the person that runs the team, has to start getting acclimated to the players. But that also depends on who else is going to be there. Sometimes the coaches want a player there and there's nobody else there. The foreign player gets there and half the team's not there. So what good does it do? But they don't trust the fact that the player is going to show up in shape. So I get that aspect of it. From a national team perspective, like especially last year, the qualifier, ends a week before, or even when the international season already begins, and they want the players go straight from the national team program into the professional league, and just we put our foot down and said we need at least 2 weeks, just the downtime. I mean, you can just miss them. They're in shape. They're going to show up in shape. They need a 2-week mental break between the end of the national season and the start of the international season. And that's just a hard line that I'll take. And I'm supported 100% by the coaches in the USA and the international USA Federation on that. And generally it's accepted, although everybody wants to kind of sneak those days up to 9 days or 8 days and not have 2 weeks. And some players go, yeah, I'll go and I'll get there, but I don't want to practice. So I'll get there a little early and I'll be there. I just want to acclimate. I don't want to get on the court. I don't want to play for a week. And most, again, high level coaches will totally understand that and say, yeah, I'd love to have you here and just relax, get used to the time change, get used to unpacking, getting where you're going to be living, and everything's fine. So arrival date, end date's pretty easy. End date is last official match of the championship. Get to go home. Some teams want you to stay for an extra week or 2 weeks to do sponsor things. Again, it depends on the national team obligations and what your commitments are afterwards. But generally, within a few days after the last official match of the season, players take off. Then the next thing is your net compensation. Net compensation, and it all depends on the budget. And the more you do this job, the easier that becomes because you understand what each team's budgets really are. You're not going to get 500,000 euro from Mulhouse. Mulhouse has a great team. They're champion in France, but you got to understand it's a French budget. And same thing in Schwerin or Dresden and Potsdam in Germany. It's a German budget. So I know what the maximum is for an outside hitter in each of those countries are opposite and what they've paid in the past. And it is what it is. In Turkey or Italy, it's going to be different. And Brazil or China or Japan, they're all going to have different scenarios as far as payments. So part of the job is to let the players know that, again, you evaluate playing for a top team in France for about the same money that you could play on a middle level team, potentially in Italy or Turkey. What do you want to do? You want to get in that higher league and be seen and take that chance that you will develop in that middle level higher league and have a chance to move up the ladder there for higher pay, or go to France or Germany and play in that league, win a championship, and then jump over uh, to a higher league from there. I mean, those are all just thought processes and how a player wants to proceed further. Payment schedule. Definitely have a date of when each payment's supposed to be paid. 8 months, 9 months, 10 months, whatever the schedule is, and paid by X amount of day. And if it's not paid, and this is what I keep in all my contracts, if it's not paid within 15 days of the due date, then the player is free to transfer to another club. Um, a lot of times, maybe the payment's a little late. It's typical for the team, but they've always paid. We know the teams that have always paid, but 50% of teams are late, I'd say, on their payments. But if a team does not want to have that clause in their contract, for me, that's an automatic red flag. Why not? If you don't put in 15 days or 30 days, and a player can go play someplace else, you know, there's something wrong there from the beginning. So I like that clause in there. Uh, then typical things about an apartment: all apartment costs are paid for. 1 or 2 bedrooms, heat, utilities, water, all those things are taken care of by the club. In a nice situation where you want the stove to work, you want you want the water to run when you come to your apartment. You want it to be clean. Those are again things that if you're investing in a player, I would expect the top teams, when a player shows up, they don't have to clean their own apartment. They walk in, they go, okay, this is nice. This is a good step, instead of walking into a better word, a shithole someplace where you're going, okay, not a good way to start my relationship with the team when I have to scrub my floor in the bathroom because it's a mess when I walk into it. Uh, Medical insurance is important, although I always ask my clients to keep a secondary insurance on their own anyway. But medical insurance is something that's important for the teams to take care of. And dispute resolution process. I always include the FIVB as a dispute resolution process. As a FIVB agent, we have the right to do that. They're slow. I'm not. I say I'm glad they started this. There's a lot of good things FIVB is doing for agents, but there's also certain things that they don't do. But I think there are so many complaints. I just got a ruling on an agent fee from a team in Italy. It took 2.5 years. We won, and I'm getting paid, but at 2.5 years to get a decision is a long time. Now, I think if it's a transfer issue, they'll put it up to the top of the heap because they're not going to wait 2.5 years for the player to make a decision. But I haven't had that come across. I'm hoping that would be expedited. But I would rather have an FIVB situation than have any kind of a judicial decision made by the country the player is in, and especially in a small little city the player is in. We'll never win that. It's not gonna. It's always going to be a subjective argument based on somebody saying that the player did not perform correctly and therefore the contract should not be adhered to. Where it doesn't say anything like that in the contract. It just says payment, pass the medical, pay the money, and it's guaranteed. And guaranteed is the last clause in there. I always have my contracts guaranteed for the player. Some teams are asking for 80% or 70% of the payment guaranteed if the player is injured for more than 1, 2, or 3 months in a progressive manner. And again, depending on the team and their budget, and if there's no other better option for the player, I think that's reasonable again as well. But my preference is always 100% guaranteed in case of injury. If the player is injured while playing or practicing, I think it is the club's obligation to take care of the contract for the player. Those are the main factors that I look at. And bonuses, of course, vary from team to team. Some are team bonuses where they don't discuss individual bonuses. Everybody gets the same. Some teams do agree to individual bonuses for players, depending on first, second, or third. Or very few teams agree to individual statistical bonuses. That's not something that's very common in Europe that I find, a little more common in the United States, but that promotes individual play more than team play. And again, I understand that concept. I like that actually. It's more of a team sport, so it's not an individual sport. but those are the main aspects that, and of course, from an agent standpoint, the team pays the agent fee. So that's something else in there, and get it paid by a certain time period, instead of waiting until after the season before we get paid our money. Um, we've done a lot of work ahead of time, and I think the agents should get paid within the first 2 or 3 months of the season. And it's really doesn't even matter if the player gets hurt or not. That's not our problem. We did not cause the injury or anything. We did not contemplate the injury. The agent did the contract, got the player there. Injuries are just bad luck. It's something that happens, and agents should get paid for the money that for the for the performance and the work they perform for the job, for the player to get to the team and finalize the contract. Uh, but I think that those are the main ones that I have.
You definitely showed your experience here. You did an exceptional job. One of the last things you said on the individual bonuses, um, I never, for myself, maybe I wasn't smart enough to go after those. Can also be, or my agent was more prudent. But in the situations that I knew some of my teammates had these individual bonuses, it never led to the most healthy situations. Dressing room wise during games, getting somebody that needs to block X amount of blocks on average in a month, in a year, strange performance bonuses, also like strange numbers that you have to reach. And it's never nice to be in a team with, you're in a team and like 2 or 3 players, because in the end, everybody will find out, and 2 or 3 players have these kind of bonuses. And yeah, it creates some kind of unnatural team play in a way. Again, this is my
Absolutely.
only
Especially,
personal opinion, of course, but yeah.
yeah, especially from a setting standpoint, if the outside hitters or the opposites have a kill requirement or uh, whatever individual
Yeah.
statistical thing is, they're the setter always feels obligated to set these people, and especially if they're friends. I mean, again, it's a team sport. It shouldn't be about the person. Um, the best teams in the world are the ones with the best chemistry, and it's not individually thought of. Everybody has an ego, and if you're playing at the highest level, everybody has an ego. Of course, they want to play, but people that are the most successful teams are not the best team. You could put the 6 greatest players on the court together, but if they don't play together as a team, it doesn't matter. If they don't have any chemistry and they all are out for themselves, they're going to lose to another 6 that have great chemistry, that are very good players in the world. It's shown over and over again in all the sports, any sport facility or any sports situation you look at. You put best soccer team out there, best American football team out there, but if they don't have chemistry or something's lacking there, they're going to lose.
The only exception where I can think of is maybe like those where we talked about before, those Asian teams. You're in Japan, you are the obvious opposite, you are the main spiker, and they have an expectation of you to make 20, 25, 30 points a game. And then at the end of the season, if you made on average that number, you get a nice little bonus. Okay, that's a nice little thing. That can never be like a substantial amount of your contract.
Yeah,
Or,
I
yeah.
probably shouldn't say this, but I always joke about South Korea or Japan, where I think anybody could coach. I mean, because the whole philosophy is set the foreigner, especially in South Korea. They swing 50, 60 times sometimes. It's just it's obvious. It is a different scenario, and it's a really good point that you've made.
No, I am preparing some, this is a little sneak peek. I am preparing some practices, some conversation with Japanese coaches, which is obviously not easy. But I really want to cover the entire globe with volleyball. So that's the next step, seeing what we can produce with those guys. So yeah.
Yeah, and I just got another thought process too with this, as far as the cultural differences, as well as it deals with the contract itself. But what USA players have to understand, and anybody from the USA, the mentality sometimes in USA thinks that from all citizens, players, people that live here, they go to another country, they're governed by the USA law. We're a United States. We can do whatever we want because it's legal in the United States. And I stress so hard to the players, you're in a different country. USA has no governance over another country. They're their own sovereign country. You got to abide by their laws, You got to respect their culture. And if you do all that, life becomes much more easier than saying, oh, we don't do it here. Well, who cares? You don't care how we do it here. You're over there. You're invited to another country. You're playing for another team in another country. You got to abide by their rules, their laws, their cultures, and accept their cultures. And the players that adapt to that and have a good experience with that and say, wow, this is really cool. This is something different. I respect this completely. You don't have to agree with it, but you got to respect it. You got to abide by it. And those are very important aspects too for U.S. players and U.S. citizens in general when they leave our country to go to other places in the world.
I have to be careful always, but I can tell you that I have seen some American patriotic ignorance, but mostly after the first few weeks, that always goes away. That always vanishes because it's obvious that it's not possible. It's not sustainable.
Right.
You're a guest in another country, and most of the other players in your team mostly also foreigners. So you have to stick together. That's for sure. Let's jump into the college coaches part of the conversation. If there are obvious questions that you really, really would like to answer, also tell me, that we can jump to those. So for me, there is no real schedule for me.
No, I think when we start talking about the college coach's role in the transition, skill development, managing expectations, like you kind of throw all those three together in a scenario where the coach's role in transition goes back to what we talked about in the first place. Some coaches just don't really care. They care about their team, how they're going to do that season. They don't want to develop necessarily a sixth position player just so that person has an opportunity to play overseas. And if you're not a sixth position player, you're not going to be playing overseas internationally in a pro or U.S. national team program. And I've seen players changing from high level teams that where they are just the outside hitter or just the opposite in the front row. And because of the substitution rules in the United States being so liberal compared to international rules, they get subbed out in the back row, never see the back row. They transition to another team, and the coaches promise that player, you're going to be a sixth position player here for me. I want to develop you all the way. And I know you have aspirations to play at a higher level, and I'm going to give you that opportunity. But some coaches just don't care. They have so much talent in their gym, and they have people that are knocking on the door to come in there every year that they don't develop them and they don't care. On the other hand, some coaches, like I said before, utilize the fact to say that, again, Nebraska's a great example with Kelsey Robinson, Jordan Larson, Justine Libero, all from Nebraska playing on the national team, winning a gold medal, succeeding internationally, and saying, hey, come here. You're going to be a sixth position player. And John does a really good job of actually having sixth position players versus some schools like a Texas, for example. I'll go out on a limb and say that they're very compartmentalized, very successful. They're both successful. I mean, I'm not saying anything about it, but from a player's standpoint, Nebraska players have been much more successful at the next level than Texas players. Just a fact. And that's because John does, I don't know if he gets more well-rounded players or he allows them to develop, and he doesn't throw in freshmen. Sometimes freshmen, sophomores don't play all the way around, but by their junior and senior year, he expects them to play all the way around, and most of them do. So that's one big thing. I think the coaches' role in transition. Some just care and some don't, as far as their players are concerned. But I understand where coaches are into it for themselves because, again, if they win, they're successful. If they lose, they're not successful. So what the player does after their university career doesn't really matter to them from a strictly objective factor of what their goals are.
Yeah. No, but this goes again back to the black and white, and there's a lot of gray. The incentive of that college coach is not to develop as many professional and successful Team USA, and that's fine. It shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be. Also,
and it's hard to do too. If you look at the example I give everybody is saying in the 84 or not 84 Olympics, but just last Olympics in 2021 in Japan, 12 players on the USA team, and I think there wasn't more than one player from each year of the university season for the last 12 years. So the chances of you making the national team and playing in the Olympics, one player out of every year making it to that level, but you got to believe it. And from a player's standpoint, you got to believe that that is your goal and that's what you want to achieve to do. But the chances of doing it, are very slim. But you don't have any chance if you don't believe it that you belong there and that you can get to that level. Skill development too. I think again, it depends on the coaches. Your skill development, managing expectations, uh, developing a high IQ for the players. Again, some coaches just teach a middle blocker to block and hit. That's all they do. Or outside hitter, just power hitter, or secondary power hitter that's a good pass receiver, or an opposite just hits, instead of teaching them the entire game. And that's maybe that's old school for me, but I grew up playing a lot of 3-on-3, 2-on-2 as a kid, and you get to read and you understand what the game is, and you play every position. Even as a setter, when I was playing, I would play outside. I'd play middle sometimes. We'd do things when we were in training in the gym. We'd be picking up and we'd be playing outside the gym, and everybody play everything, and especially triples. Play 3-on-3, and you learn the game, and you get to read, and I find that even watching at the pro level, sometimes when I'm watching, I'm talking to my clients, and I go, doesn't this player see that when the block's inside, you should cover the line, or if the ball's tight on the net, chances of them rolling the shot into the deep corner is like almost zero. So maybe come up and play defense um, behind the block, or the hitters when the set's inside. Don't you got two blockers on you? What are you going to try to kill it for? Try to make a shot out of it. Think. You got to think instead of just do something that coaches can help develop that volleyball IQ as to what is the right thing to do depending on the situation. Maybe the set's tight, maybe the set's inside, maybe the set's off the net, maybe it's outside the pin. That all automatically the middle blocker should be thinking, this is where I have to go on the block. This is what I should do as an outside hitter when the set's off. But you only have a split second to make that decision, right? And if you don't have that ability to think that quickly, then you're screwed. So you're not going to be playing at the highest level, and the highest level players can think really quickly on the court. So I think the coaches can help in developing that aspect of it. Some athletes just don't have the ability to get there anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
No, for sure, without naming names, there's for sure not for the article or for the video stuff. I'm even not gonna name names like to you, but because we did last time, and I think it's I don't want to talk tonight, but there are obviously a few players the last few years coming out of college, talented spikers, important players for the programs, that are on the sidetrack right now because they were not developed as six rotation players. Maybe they could have been, but if you're now 23, second year abroad, 24, you're 24, 25, nobody's gonna, even if you're a talent spiker, if you're not a superstar spiker, nobody's gonna put time in you to develop that part of the game, because other players started doing that when they were 16, 17, 18, 19. I guess college coaches in general don't need somebody to represent them, or do you always advise to at least have a spokesperson? Maybe it doesn't need to be a lawyer, and then you can make your example of the coach that you represent, and then you can make the more general example. Like, what is your advice? What is something common that you see that goes wrong?
Yeah, regarding college coaches in the United States, what my philosophy has been, representing various coaches at high-level schools, is that I let them discuss the contract directly with the athletic director. I sit in the background, and I'm their advisor. I have them tell the athletic director that they've retained an attorney to review their contract, and I think it is important to have an attorney, somebody who understands the legalese and is able to review a contract and let somebody know the pluses and minuses of what's in their contract. But I think it's also important for situations players is to develop that relationship with the athletic director and not have just somebody go in there and negotiate on their behalf. It's again a team atmosphere in the athletic department, and unless you're going up to the football or basketball contracts, I think it's better to have the coach directly talk to them. They initiate the conversation with the coach, and it also gives them an opportunity to say, let me take this back to my attorney and have them review it, because I think it's very uncomfortable situation as well, because the AD sometimes, athletic director, feels like they can shove something down a coach's throat, say, take this. This is the way it is. This is the way it's going to be. And that should not be the situation either. So and sometimes the coaches will go, okay, then I better take this or I'm going to lose this opportunity, or this is not right. I shouldn't argue with the athletic director. It's perfectly normal and an athletic director shouldn't really be doing that. But if they are trying to be really hard on you, they should just say, listen, I got to take a look at this contract. I got to give it to my advisor. I'll have him review it. I'll get back to you the next day or two. And usually these things happen quickly because end of the season, they want to get the new coach in place. So it's a 2-week process maybe that happens, that a coach has an offer and you go through that. And then what I do is I sit down with the coaches and I talk about them and I say, okay, first of all, analyze where they've been before. I mean, if a coach is coming from a winning program, even a lower level winning program, and it's getting that opportunity to be in one of the top teams in the world, he's got more leverage because he's had a track record of winning and establishing, and he's got some head coaching experience. Not at the highest level yet, but you have an argument saying, "Hey, listen, I've done good here. I've been successful here. This is my game plan, and this is what I'm going to do for you. This is what I'm expecting to do." Versus a coach that's never been a head coach and never had any success, but maybe he's had success as an assistant coach, has great references, and he's going to get this first shot as a head coach. That's a different scenario. Again, there you're going, okay, evaluate the situation. And both situations should evaluate the situation. What is your chance of succeeding in this program? Because if you don't have a chance of succeeding in this program, how is that going to affect your career? So what does the chance of success involve? What are their facilities like? What is going to be your opportunity to recruit the best players of the United States to come to your school? What is your operating budget? How much money do you have to do everything you need to do? Are you traveling by van? Do you have an opportunity to travel by charter plane? What is your assistant coaching budget? Level of people that you can bring in? Do you have a dedicated physio, dedicated strength coach? Do you have a dedicated manager that will take care of all your business for your university travel and anything else you need from an operations standpoint? So not just monetarily, but what is your support monies? And that's not negotiating in the contract. That's something they need to find out. It's never in the coach's contract as your operating budget or your recruiting budget. But they need to get that out there and say, hey, I need to know what kind of money I have to deal with. Because if you got $500,000 at X school and Nebraska's got $10 million, you're never going to beat Nebraska. So you want to have a chance to do that. And then you talk about the compensation, and the other big thing is, besides compensation, is the buy-sell or buyout clause in a coach's contract. Because if coach wants security, so they generally are 3 to 5 year contracts, which is totally understandable. Argumentally saying, "Hey, I'm inheriting a team that I have no input on. It's going to take me at least 2 or 3 years to bring my people in, get these people out, or assimilate the people I want to stay with my program to make it into my program. But then after 4 or 5 years, it is your team. So if they're not producing on the court, you don't have any more argument left, right? So it's your team. So you want a 4 or 5 year contract if possible. But then what is the buyout on that? Some schools have equal buyouts. So if you want to leave someplace else, that other school has to pay for your entire contract to get out of it. I've had success in negotiating buyouts where if you don't go to the same conference, the buyout decreases. You're not competing with the schools in the same conference, so it doesn't matter too much. Or if you have an opportunity to coach in a national team program or an international opportunity, that's again not competing with the university program. So the buyout could be a lot less, or even take it out of the picture. Or there's definitely a decreasing buyout. So the first, second, third year is a higher buyout amount, and the last 2 years would be a lesser buyout amount for the contract. And those are all subjective too. There's certain situations where schools have the buyout clause in there, but there's a mutual agreement to go and no buyout. You can go. There's a good relationship going on between the athletic director and the coach. Say, hey, I'm not going to stop you from this opportunity, especially in a mid-level team. Somebody's coming from a mid-level team that's, never going to make the NCAAs, but they've had success and they've done really well. And all of a sudden, a top 30 school's asking you to play. Athletic directors generally won't hold back a younger, promising coach from giving them that opportunity to go to a bigger school. They might try to get some money from that bigger school, but generally they'll be receptive to that opportunity for you.
No, that goes back to to playing the long-term game. Of course, you don't want to be known as that athletic director that, took away possibilities from somebody that could,
And then coaches have a lot of bonus opportunities. That's where even individual ones is because that is them. So, making it to the NCAA tournament, first round, second round, third round, getting to the championship, getting conference championship, getting first, second, third in your conference, graduating athletes. That's also something in most contracts that how many of your athletes are going to graduate? Coach of the year, AVCA coach of the year, conference coach of the year. Those are all aspects that can be put in there. And I always say, hey, the chances are low that anybody ever wins the national championship, but there's always one winner. And if you get that win and you get $50,000 to $100,000 for a bonus for doing that, and if it's not in your contract, you never get it. So let's put it in there. Put everything in your coach of the year. Put it in there. It's never minimal. You got to have those expectations. They happen. So those are important clauses also to get in there, just to get some incentive for them, especially for younger coaches that don't, if they want to give you less money, say, okay, less money because I haven't established myself yet and I haven't proven myself yet. But if I prove myself in the next 3 to 5 years, give me some incentive clauses. Okay, we start out in 6th, 7th place in the conference. If I make it to the first, second, third place, give me X amount of money for a bonus because I've achieved beyond expectations and I've achieved what a first, second, third place coach should get in that conference. And that way you can compensate for it.
You touched at the start, and you touched on an interesting point that it's obvious for a coach. Of course, also the aspect of the family and moving your family across the nation or across states, etc., is not so convenient. Most contracts are 3, 4, 5. I think the average is 4 years, right, for a college coaching contract. But if then the reasoning is I'm inheriting a program and you have to let me do my job before you can actually judge me or actually conclude how my performance was. Now we have the aspect of the transfer portal. Do you see programs, athletic directors, maybe from an opportunistic point of view, go less long because they say, look, like you could even transfer players in. So we're not, the reasoning of the inheritance is not really valid anymore. Is that something already happening? Do you see coaches' contracts getting shorter because of that reasoning?
I don't think shorter. I would actually want longer and longer, but
you would want longer.
Yeah. And I think it's just in every sport in the United States, it's a scenario where they're going to have to deal with it. I don't think the shorter or longer of it's going to make any difference. I think the portal is personally a big issue. And talking to coaches, I don't know any coach that likes the portal. I can see the argument from a player standpoint, again, being an agent, saying, players are recruited as freshmen in the university system, and they're promised a starting role. And these coaches get the top players in the United States. And then these top players, all of a sudden, the next year, they say the same thing to the next recruiting class. A young player comes in and that first recruiting class, that player is on the bench and they're not happy. They're not being able to evolve and show what they can do. So they want out of their program because the coach has lost interest in them. So they should go to another program. Problem it involves is when the middle level teams have somebody that all of a sudden explodes and has a great season. And all of a sudden these top teams go, I want her or him to come over to me. And the player goes, oh, of course. Why wouldn't I leave X small school here that has no chance of anything? And I have an opportunity to go play for a top 20 school. It's a scenario where the loyalty kills me. I think if you commit to a team, you should stay with that team, but it's upset the whole scenario. So coach doesn't know who they're going to have next year. That portal opens up. They don't know who's going to come into their team for the next season. And the players don't know what they're going to do. Some players stay, some players go. So it's a really very difficult scenario to navigate. And I don't see, to answer your questions, that the coaches' contracts get any shorter because of that specific.
No, it was just the thing that popped in my head. It can be a reasoning for somebody. We'll not put this online because it could be used, I don't want this to be used against you in a couple of months.
Yeah, I think maybe the coaches should go on a coaching portal, that's what
just like this, it's very obvious that on Volley Brains, I don't want to espouse my personal opinion. It needs to stay objective because that's the only way to really be able to be this like medium that shares knowledge of coaches. But I have a strong opinion about whatever is going on. In the end, the transfer portal goes against everything that is college volleyball, I understand NIL. I understand also NIL does the same as we talked about before when we talked about the individual performance bonuses. This does the same to a team because you have certain players that are more important. And that's not easy to handle. But maybe that's also like preparing you for the pro leagues or for life, because in the end, it's a meritocracy, it's not, you're not just given stuff. But the portal is something weird.
You have that. And one of my favorite sayings is you can't have success without failure. It depends how a player adapts to failure. So if a player is benched after their first year because they did not progress as expected, how does that player bounce back? The great players are going to get pissed and they're going to work harder. And they're going to come back next season and they're going to show, hey, I'm better. I need to improve in X, Y, and Z. A good coach is going to say, I did this to you because I need you to get better in these facets of your game. Now, are you going to try to get better in those facets of the game if you have the athletic ability and the potential to do that? Or are you going to get pissed off and say, this coach doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm going someplace else. And if that's the mentality you carry through life, you're not it doesn't have to be athletics. It's in everything else. I mean, there's more failure than success in everybody's life. But what do we hear about? We always hear about the successes. We don't hear about the failures. You have to get over the fact that people are going to say you're no good or you can't do that. Realistically, you got to value your skills. If you're 5'4" tall and you can't jump 6 inches, you're not going to be a volleyball player. Maybe a libero or something, but you're not going to be an outside hitter. So you got to evaluate your realities in life. And that's the same thing the coaches have to do. And I think that's from a coaching standpoint too. They have to evaluate their abilities, but it's helpful. The coaches that I've helped represent in their contracts, a lot of them a little insecure as far as their belief. Gosh, I am the decision maker. As a head coach, I have to take responsibility. I can't just be assistant coach and say, I didn't make that call. Everything's on your shoulders. So do you want to get paid more money, have more responsibility, and try to achieve more in your life? Or do you want to sit back and be an assistant coach or a coach for a mid-level team where it doesn't really matter that much in life? How far do you want to progress? You've played at the highest levels. Every time you go on that court, every year, you're going, okay, I got to produce. And you got a little butterfly. If you don't have butterflies in your stomach, there's something wrong. Everybody has butterflies in their stomach when they're doing things that is uncomfortable. But how many people want to push themselves into that uncomfortable scenario where they're not sure what's going to happen. And that's
It's
true in
a,
any.
there's a Polish weightlifter that lives in the States for many years, and his quote goes, let me now not butcher it. His quote is going, easy choices, hard life, hard choices, easy life. You know, I think that sums it up.
Yeah, I totally agree. And from a coach's standpoint too, to, I think it's hard for them to separate the emotions. So I think it is important for them to have some backdrop and have somebody tell them, hey, this is what you need to do. You can do it. And let's talk about it. And like I said, family is important. I didn't address that. But again, if they have kids and a wife, pick them up. They have to go someplace else. They have to move someplace. But I say that's just part of the coach's job description. I mean, if you want to be a coach, you're not that seasoned life. You're a great coach. You're thinking about coaching all the time. I mean, you just can't. I coached my daughter's club team from age 12 to 18. I was paid 25 cents an hour to do this, but I enjoyed doing it. But I was spending my evenings thinking of how to do things better, how to make a certain kid that liked the game and how to make her better. I didn't have to do that. I could have just showed up every time and thrown out some balls and say, let's play 6-on-6 or let's do some drills. But, how much time do you put into caring about it? It's a really a special profession because you're taking care of young kids, but yet you're getting paid at the next level to win and succeed. I think the coaches they can never stop learning. And what I'm impressed talking to John and Karch as my clients, these guys have never sat back and said, I know everything. I'm amazed how humble they are they are learning from they want to speak to other coaches. They want to speak to people like me, even to hear from what players are thinking or whatever else. I mean, it doesn't matter. They're always learning. They're never comfortable saying, I've had enough. I know everything. You guys don't know anything. Listen to me because I'm right. They don't have that mentality. And I think the greatest coach has done the same thing. And, I got Bree King playing there. She just loves him because he just relates to the players and he's such a good communicator and he's always learning as well. I mean, you take the best coaches in the world and they're all like that. Young coaches, I think go back to the situation. I think it helps if you understand the game. I really do from a coach. Dunning is an anomaly. I don't know how he ever did it to get to where he was without actually ever playing the game. But he understood the concept. I think he knew basketball. That's where he came from, basketball to volleyball. But you can never, if you got to at least understand the game. And I think if you've been on the court, and you don't have to be a starter or superstar. I think a lot of times the superstars or starters think, why can't you do this? It's simple, right? It's not that simple to be able to break down the game to the very basic facets of teaching somebody how to put their hands together to pass, how to swing, how to block, all those things instead of just saying, put your arms up, turn it in, block. See, do this. But you go to seminars, you listen to other coaches talk, you watch film, you take together, you might only take one aspect out of everything you see, or you read management books, not volleyball books, but management books or leadership books. And you take one or two things out of something. You might read a 300-page book and you might take one thing out of there saying, I like that. It applies to me. The rest of it doesn't apply to me, but something there does. And you take that out and you put together your own philosophy. But then again, every year it may change depending on the players you have in the gym. You have to adapt to and see who is in the gym and how to make that team the best possible team. And then you got to figure out, okay, next year, who do I recruit? What do I need to help this team get better? What kind of assistant coaches do I need to help improve a certain skill level that I don't have knowledge about, that I need an assistant coach to help me with the middle blockers, with the outsides, with defense. Those are all the aspects that are I think really important for coaches to think about to be successful.
No, yeah, and that goes back again. Now I have to push volley brains here down your throat, but that's exactly why I'm doing this, because there is no one coach that has all the answers to every question. For me, it's a world of pain to put social media content out because it's just not natural to me. Like let me do these things, let me talk 10 more minutes with somebody. But of course, for volley brains, you need to put something out. Otherwise, people don't know what you're doing and what you stand for. Today, the post it's Alan Knipe saying in the interview with Alan, he said, you have to develop your own coach's toolbox, because you, as an assistant, when you're starting out, you will agree with many people. You will disagree with many people. Like all these opinions, the introspection that you do, put that in your toolbox. And that's how you develop yourself. You cannot just talk with, I'm not going to name it, you cannot just talk to coach and like be a second coach. No, you have to do it yourself. You have to learn yourself, And yeah, that's the perfect ending right here.
Yeah, the beauty of talking to a coach or a John or Al, any one of these high level coaches, and I'm just naming USA coaches. There's plenty of high level coaches in Europe and in South America and Japan as well, that are really good coaches, and they all should say the same thing, that what you just said. I love the toolbox analogy. I mean, you bring it in, you got in the toolbox, and every year you take out your tools, what you need for that year, but you have to have a toolbox. You have to know what to look for. If you don't know what to look for, you're screwed.
Yeah.